And I think we're good to go. I will go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sai. I am one of the senior solutions engineers here at Zenhub, and today we're going to be having a conversation around bottlenecks, right? Bottlenecks within the process, the workflow that our team is currently running, as well as how to take advantage of Zenhub to cut down on some of those challenges. We are going to focus on learning how to spot those workflows, those constraints, figure out where we need to add additional resources, leverage Zenhub's visualization tools to figure out what it looks like when we are seeing a lack of resourcing within a specific sector, team, or part of the SDLC. And from there, how we're going to implement some data-driven solutions. So to start off with, what is a bottleneck, right? How would we define that? And it's typically defined as a point in your workflow where the demand for a particular portion of the team, a particular specific type of work exceeds the capacity and therefore causes delays that affect the downstream production process. There's a few different types of bottlenecks, right? The most common is resource bottlenecks, right? We have members of our team that are overloaded, that don't necessarily have the capacity to take on additional work that we require them to. We've got process bottlenecks, so inefficient steps or lengthy approvals processes that tend to drag on. Technical bottlenecks, lack of, service, for example, technical debt or infrastructure limitations that don't necessarily allow us to execute on the deliverables we had in mind. And finally, communication bottlenecks, right? We can't get information to the people we need to in a smooth enough process, and that ends up causing some challenges downstream. So what are the warning signs? Stories that sit in the same status for longer than maybe they should, right? Maybe a ticket that typically should take 2 days is now taking us weeks. Growing backlogs of unaddressed issues. This can be, pretty common, particularly for those organizations that are fairly agile and are constantly taking in additional information from their customers, for example. That product backlog can get fairly prodigious. And then recurring and missed deadlines, right? We're regularly finding that we're not hitting the timelines that we expected. We're regularly falling short of the goals that we've set for our sprint itself. So what do some of these examples look like, and how can we use Zenhub to make our experience a little bit smoother? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and give you a quick idea as to what that looks like. The first thing that we can do is, before we even get into any of the reporting or data visualization tools that we have within the Zenhub suite, what we can do is we can just take a look at the pipelines itself within the context of the board. We can see here, for example, new issues doesn't seem to be too large. We can scroll down a little bit there. Product backlog is fairly prodigious. And as we scroll to the right, we're seeing more and more issues, particularly here with review QA. We can see a ton of issues that are sitting there, particularly in contrast to the issues within the context of the other pipelines. The first thing that we can do, just within the context of the Kanban board, is we can actually go into each one of these pipelines, click on settings and automations, and instantaneously create limits. Limits to the number of issues that we see within each pipeline, but as well as issue age limits. So let's say, for example, any ticket that hits review QA, we want to be addressed within the context of 2 days, right? And if it hasn't been addressed within 2 days, if it hasn't been moved out of the QA pipeline into another pipeline, we'd like it to be highlighted red and then given that little fire emoji. And we'd also like to see some sort of limitation to the number of tickets that we see within that pipeline. We can go ahead and let's presumably set this to 5. And from there, hit save. Once we go back to that pipeline, we can immediately see that we have one ticket at the very bottom that's been indicated as stale. This has been sitting there for longer than we would like it to. We expect those tickets within the review QA pipeline to be dealt with within a day or two. And finally, we can see that the pipeline itself is over that limit of 5 tickets that we saw, right? So it's immediately being highlighted to us that there's a challenge. We can do this with any and all of the different pipelines. Some of them, that might not necessarily be the best idea, particularly if we're talking about something like a product backlog or I don't know, a design backlog. But anything that's actively waiting for a team member to get a hold of that ticket, that piece of work, and then follow it up with some sort of action, some sort of task, this could be incredibly helpful. That being said, this is probably the least sophisticated way within Zenhub to take a look as to what is going on. What we can actually do is go to the bottleneck tracking report that we have within our reporting suite. This gives us a very specific view as to how our team has been performing over a given time period. Let's say in this case, I want to look at the last 6 months. I only want to look at the one repository that it's aligned with, and we can immediately see how chaotic that looks. This is a demo environment, so I don't want anyone to to take anything from this. We tend to do pretty well internally, but we can see that there are these massive mismatches of specific tickets, and especially within the context of sprint backlog here. So let's just say we want to winnow this down to a little bit further to about 6 months. Let's get rid of some of those pipelines, the stage of the software development cycle that are further ahead. And we can see at this point, roughly the end of January, the beginning of February, we saw a massive spike of tickets within the sprint backlog and in progress pipelines. This doesn't necessarily have to be a big thing, right? Let's say there's a specific piece of technical debt that's preventing your team from rolling out a new initiative, a new feature that you think would supercharge your product or your products. Being able to work really hard and really fast on getting those tickets out of the way before moving forward can be something that you're really looking forward to. But in contrast to that, if we go to one of our existing teams, bottleneck tracking reports, and we go to the 3-month breakdown, we can see here that this looks a lot more steady and calm, right? We are repeatedly and regularly working at roughly the same pace. There isn't any sort of massive spike with regard to any one of the stages of the software development lifecycle. We have a steady pace we are committed to, and we are taking realistic steps towards building out our specific sprints and expectations for the deliverables. One of the reasons this could be happening, though, within your bottleneck tracking is that you aren't necessarily using all the tools at your disposal in order to make sure that future sprints are being accurately mapped. So if I go to the team velocity page here, this will give us a breakdown as to the average velocity of the team as well as the rolling velocity, or the current rolling velocity. So here we know that this team on average completes about 34 story points sprint over sprint. As we were planning out our future sprint, if we aren't taking that information into account, we'll find that quite regularly we aren't getting where we need to go. So if I find a previous sprint, for example, let's take a look here. Maybe I'll find one here. Perfect example. Here you can see that this team allocated 120 story points worth of work to this specific sprint. They didn't take any advantage of the automation, or maybe after they took advantage of the automation, they were manually adding tickets to the sprint. And as you can see, they came about 50 story points shy of that intended target that they had set out for themselves. Once again, taking full advantage of that average velocity information as well as the rolling velocity. And then from there, navigating to our sprint planning module here. And then using that information to plan out those future sprints, we can cut down on the amount of sort of erratic behavior that we're seeing within the context of each one of those stages on a sprint over sprint basis. The last thing, though, I kind of wanted to talk about was what we call our lead time cycle time report. What this allows us to do is it allows us to compare and contrast how long it's taking for our teams to get to go from one stage to another stage, right? This is what I was talking about earlier when I was mentioning how there are different types of bottlenecks, right? Resource bottlenecks could result in the whole team necessarily not being able to take to take all the steps that they need to take to finish the work that's been set to them. But here we're talking about process bottlenecks. If there's a specific discipline within the context of your team, whether it's back-end engineers, front-end engineers, QA engineers, etc., designers, this is where you would figure that out. So if we zoom out here, let's take a look at the last 3 months worth of work. And let's see if we can go from sprint, backlog to closed. Here we can figure out if there are any trends or habits that we don't necessarily want to see within the context of our team. So we can see that the average time it's taking is about 13.7 days. 176 issues have gone through this specific cadence during that time period. Rolling average is 12.4 and our median is 7. But here we can figure out if there are any particular tickets that might additionally raise some red flags. So I can see that this ticket here, implementation planning, has taken 43 days to complete and has been assigned a story point of 3, right? That's well outside the boundaries of what we consider normal. Being able to click into that ticket, scroll down further, see what that log has kept for it and going from there, as well as the ticket below it, 62 days, while given a story point of 2, gives us even more information that we can use to figure out what specific challenges our team is facing. Is there a specific team member that they're the only one that does what they do? And as a result, some of these tickets take much longer than they should. Is there a portion of the process, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't necessarily give you the answer as to what exactly is going on, but it definitely will send you in the right direction that you're aiming to head for. And so on that note, we have pretty much finished up for the day. I'd like to kind of take a few minutes though and make sure any questions you guys have I can address right now. So let's take a look here. How do you distinguish between a temporary workflow spike and an actual bottleneck that needs addressing? That is a great question. And I think we briefly went over that. So here, if we saw that relative to the product backlog, let's say the in progress and the sprint backlog is temporarily spiking before reverting to the average that it was at previously, we can tell that that's a temporary spike. This isn't something that's continuous. But if we see this constant increase, heading up to the right in relation to the other pipelines which remain flat or are kind of being done at the same pace, in that case, we can see that it's not just a temporary spike. It is a structural challenge that we need to address. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? What are some quick wins to address bottlenecks once we've identified them using Zenhub? Great question. I think we'd have to figure out what type of bottleneck it is specifically. If we figure out that there is, a process bottleneck, we only have, let's say, 3 QA engineers, and they're overwhelmed by the amount of work they have to do. Breaking down or sort of prioritizing what work gets sent to them for the next release would be a really, really good way to do that. That way they can, we have realistic expectations, surrounding what work can be done, and we're making very deliberate choices as to what we want shipped after it's gone through that QA process. Obviously, if there's not enough people to just take care of that task, we will have to go back to the team and see if we can get some additional support in that regard. But that's a really easy way to get that done. When switching between different workspaces, can we see only the epics related to the workspace instead of seeing all the epics from all workspaces? Give me 1 sec to wrap my mind around that. When switching between different workspaces, can we see only the epics related to the workspace instead of seeing all the epics from all the workspaces? Okay, I understand what you're asking. We are, some of you know, currently transitioning from one system to the other. So we have some team members or some users that are currently on what we call platform epics, which are those Zenhub epics, and some of them are seeing the new timeline view and are using that view. For those that are on platform epics, yes, all epics from across the organization, irregardless of workspace, will appear on the left-hand side under that epics page. For those of you that are currently on the new timeline feature set, those epics are pegged at the repository level. So if that epic is tied to a specific repository, it will appear on that workspace as well. If not, it will not be. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to throw them in. Anyone else? Can Zenhub help us predict bottlenecks before they occur or only identify existing ones? That is a very good question. I think it can. And I would bring us back to that lead cycle time report. Being able to spot discrepancies that are slowly starting to appear between the amount of time it's taking a ticket to go through a specific portion of the software development lifecycle and the expectation as to the amount of effort that's going to be allocated to that specific ticket is probably the way to do that. You will not see a sudden spike overnight. Initially, people will start falling behind ever so slightly, and then that will gradually increase until it gets to the point where it's blatantly obvious. But taking a regular look at your lead time, cycle time report and staying on top of that is probably the best way to be able to anticipate those challenges before they occur. Hopefully that answers your question too. How can we convince team members to change their workflow when Zenhub identifies a bottleneck in their area? Good question. Change is hard. As someone that works in the change management area, it can always be a little bit challenging. But I find, in my opinion, that being able to illustrate the evidence of the fact that there is a recurring challenge, and getting buy-in from the individuals in question is usually a great first step towards getting there. Anyone else? How do we set appropriate limits in Zenhub when we have team members working across multiple projects? Great question, and there's a very specific answer to that. What we can do in that context, and what we do to some extent internally, is we can go ahead and take advantage of workflows. So what we can do here is take the workspace for each one of the individual boards that team is working on, and then pump them all into what we call an executive workspace. So all the information from the smaller workspaces will end up feeding into that larger workspace. And once that's done, we can go into that executive workspace, we can go into team velocity, and from there, break down each one of the sprints according to assignee. Once at that point, we have a realistic understanding of how much work they're doing in their totality, we can go ahead and figure out how much of their week or sprint we'd like them to allocate to each one of those smaller projects. This can also be done on a broader basis, not just at the individual team level, but we can also filter work out by label, figuring out how much of our team's overall effort is being focused on each one of the specific pieces of work, disciplines, epics, whatever breakdown your team prefers to use, and then go ahead and use that information to make informed decisions as we move forward. Hopefully that answers you as well. Do we have any other questions? If not, I guess that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for showing up. We will be doing this in about, I think, 3 weeks at this point. I'd just like to drop a little piece of information. One of our team members will be reaching out to you and providing you with a feedback form regarding what you guys would like to talk about, right? What interests you guys, what piques your curiosity. Go ahead and drop your suggestions there, and we'll see if we can help you guys out with whatever interests you. That being said, I think this is all for now. Thank you so much for making it, and I hope to see you guys soon. And yeah, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes just in case anyone has any last minute questions, anything they want to chat about. But other than that, have a great day and enjoy your Easter weekend.
It actually looks like we got one more question in there.
Ooh, I'm so sorry. Follow up on the workspace questions. Are those paid subscriptions, the platform feature, and the other one you mentioned? I can't remember. Yes, the workflow automation that I was mentioning, I think is part of our enterprise plan, if I remember accurately. So yes, it is part of our enterprise plan. Hopefully that answers your question too. I'm so sorry I didn't get to you. I completely blanked on that. And now I think we're all done. One of my colleagues has dropped a link in the chat, so please feel free to go ahead and take full advantage of that link you see there. Let us know what interests you guys, and again, for the second time, have a great Easter weekend and take care of yourselves.